free market economy is unsustainable, polarized and dependent economy. Consumer countries are dependent on producing countries for the products they need. Therefore, consumer countries are subjected to arbitrary exploitation and price control by producing countries, and are forced to buy counterfeit and harmful goods because it is not easy to inspect or verify their quality. Conversely, producing countries are dependent on the consumption of non-producing countries for the money. If, for any reason, the consuming country stops buying, the economy of the producing country collapses. Free market economy brings about severe unemployment and high prices globally. The control by large corporations destroys the popularization of capital and industry, needed for healthy competition, and the slave labors cause severe unemployment in all industrialized countries. At the same time, it creates a situation of dangerous, harmful, counterfeit goods, and it makes goods exorbitantly expensive in countries where they blend capitalism and socialism, like Canada and the EU countries. In the contrary, a healthy economy is one that is national, not international. The national economy relies on and belongs to the people, not the capitalists. Capital is only a necessary element of an industrialized economy, used to serve the people, not the other way around. A national economy balances supply and demand. The people must be wealthy for there to be demand, and the industry must be strong for there to be supply. A fair society, healthy competition, laws protecting workers' rights, laws against market monopolies, merit-based systems, etc., are all essential elements for a healthy national economy. Also, a healthy international economy is characterized by healthy trade between nations. Industrialized countries sell what they produce and buy what they need, or they engage in competitive trade with each other. Industrialized countries simply send their factories to other industrialized countries to assemble products for sale there, more convenient than shipping the finished goods, thus selling their products while creating jobs for the consuming country. Non-industrialized countries sell their resources and buy industrialized goods. Capitalists from industrialized countries come to non-industrialized countries to exploit resources, share profits, and create jobs for the non-industrialized countries, but without taking jobs away from the industrialized countries. When industrialized countries transfer their technology to non-industrialized countries for slave labor manufacturing, and collude with corrupt politicians to brutally exploit and destroy the environment in order to produce cheap goods for capitalists, which are then sold back to industrialized countries, but at a high price, that is criminal. It is the crimes of exploiting workers in the producing country and destroying the economy of the consuming country. Serving capitalism through crimes is the red capitalism created by Chinese communists. Red capitalism does not create a truly wealthy and strong economy for the nations, but only for the globalists. Chinese communists use it to enrich their red capitalists with the aim of controlling and dominating the world with money, and to build modern weapons to conquer the Pacific. Exploiting workers and paying them meager wages to produce cheap goods is foolish, not wise. Because everywhere, the majority of people are workers, not owners, and they need money for element of demand to exist, and demand creates supply. Exploiting labor in the producing country and selling it back to the consuming country destroys demand in both countries. In the producing country, the exploited population becomes poor and lacks the money to buy, while in the consuming country, the unemployed people have no money to buy. High wages for workers lead to wealth and create purchasing power for the element of supply, thus strengthening and sustaining the national economy. Since 1991, Vietcong, under the orders of their Chinese masters, implemented Marxist capitalism, red capitalism, which they brought to Vietnam from China. The idea of red capitalism is that Vietcong collude with powerful and wicked rich people, Quang Hao Ac Ba, to enrich themselves through crimes. Vietcong sold out the Vietnamese people and the country for profits, primarily by begging international capitalists, the globalists, especially American capitalists, to come to Vietnam for cheaper labored manufacturing. Vietcong then acted as pimps, organized economic prostitution rings, mimicking the Chinese economic prostitution model in Vietnam, to compete for foreign investments by exploiting Vietnamese people even more ruthlessly than Communist China. The so-called industrial zones in Vietnam are merely a euphemism for an international economic brothel, a mechanism through which the Viet Cong clique enslaves the South and ruthlessly destroys the environment to serve unscrupulous capitalists, all for the sake of amassing dollars to funnel back to the North. In essence, southern Vietnam, the Republic of Vietnam, serves as an economic colony for the cunning, cruel, and thuggish northern communist bandits, while the entire nation of Vietnam functions as an economic prostitution colony for Communist China. But initially, the U.S. was unwilling to establish diplomatic relation with Viet Cong, so Viet Cong immediately handed Vietnam over to China, selling land to Chinese red capitalists, offering enclaves and concessions for Chinese use, opening the borders wide for Chinese to freely infiltrate Vietnam, meaning they turned Vietnam into a disguised economic colony of Communist China. At the same time, parallel to the economic prostitution system, Viet Cong established another huge disguised prostitution system in the form tourist services and operations throughout Vietnam, especially in the territory of the Republic of Vietnam, to extort money from Vietnamese people overseas. The most despicable and vile thing about Viet Cong is that they use the Vietnamese people to extort money from the U.S. And they use Vietnam to extort money from Vietnamese refugees fleeing Viet Cong, their victims, whom they label as overseas Vietnamese. Inside Vietnam, by using criminal economy prostitution, Viet Cong have turned the Vietnamese people into unscrupulous individuals, only interested in making money regardless of the vile and immoral means. Meanwhile, in the U.S., the American communists, the anti-war activists who later took over the Democratic Party and controlled all branches of the U.S. federal government, and some states, destroyed the American national economy. They made American people poor and unemployed. They undermined the true middle-class economic system of the U.S. They served the criminal global economic machine of the Chinese and Vietnamese communists to make them filthy wealthy. This forced Vietnamese refugees in the U.S. to submit to Viet Cong for sustenance, because of economy reasons, to live in fear, and to willingly become their dogs, like the low-life singers who returned to Vietnam to serve Viet Cong, using Vietnam culture. And to willingly become overseas, communist, Vietnamese so they could return to Vietnam to earn a living by collaborating with Viet Cong, or be exploited by Viet Cong. The corrupt economic machine of Viet Cong infiltrated the U.S., Viet Cong's people migrated to the U.S., pretending to be ignorant of politics, they secretly eradicated the Republic of Vietnam overseas through unscrupulous economic means. But heaven does not tolerate evil. The fraudulent, criminal economic machine of the Chinese Communist Party has been struck down by divine retribution since national capitalist Trump took executive power in the U.S. It is everybody's wish that if the Chinese Communist Party's criminal economy collapses, the Chinese Communist Party will inevitably perish. And if the Chinese Communist Party dies, the Vietnamese Communist Party will surely die with it, like a dog dies along its master. But now, Viet Cong continues its holding back shit to cross the river game, continues its licking the capitalist ass game, continues its anonymous treachery game to dupe the U.S. to allow its economic cesspool to continue to rape the Vietnamese people with American money. Therefore, we must continue to fight and spread this truth even more strongly. We must let the Vietnamese people and the world know that economic collusion with the Viet Cong is a big crime against the Vietnamese people and the Vietnamese nation. At the same time, we must help President Trump understand the truth about all the crimes that Viet Cong have committed against Vietnam and against the United States, and the conspiracies in which Viet Cong are using the United States and the Vietnamese people to serve Communist China, their master, the America's uno numero enemy. We must inform, we must petition, we must demand, we must appeal, we must protest, We must denounce the economic crimes of Vietcong to the Vietnamese people, to the American people, and to the world so that they can help us destroy Vietcong and save Vietnam.